Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming back today. Today, just to start, a couple announcements. So right off the bat, we've got the Game Jam coming up. So that's going to be the weekend after we get back from break. And that's going to be 7 p.m. March 24th to 7 p.m. March 26th. And then, of course, leave some time for the award ceremony at the end, so about another hour. If you can't be there the whole time, that's totally fine. If you can just stop in for a bit, just let your team that you're working with know if you're going to be on a team. And definitely have at least one person from your team at the award ceremony. All right, so today's topic, making your game rewarding. Originally, I wanted to do a topic of risk versus reward, but I was looking into it a lot and doing some research, and I'm like, I think the concept here is kind of simple. We're going to touch on risk versus reward. I could have made a whole talk on that, but it would have been really boring and maybe talking about like some statistics and stuff like that, and I don't really think that's what we're here for. So it's really more about the idea of having rewarding things in your game in general and making your game a rewarding experience overall. So what makes a game rewarding? Goals and objectives. Definitely. Completion falls under goals and objectives, and we're going to talk about completion as its own kind of separate topic, but just know completion, some of these other topics can also fall into that as well. Progression is a big one, right? Progressing from the beginning to the end of the game can be very rewarding, as well as just you as yourself as a player progressing through like skill level and stuff like that. And that sort of thing is also very rewarding to a player. Replayability is very rewarding to the player. Being able to play through an entire game one time and then be able to come back and play through it a second time with a different experience or a different outcome, that's huge. Exploration and discovery, another big one. Experimentation and options, that's a huge one, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And of course, risk versus reward. First, we got to talk about something completely different. And that is extrinsic versus intrinsic. So an extrinsic motivation or reward or kind of goal would be like something the game lays out for you, right? So a lot of the time, a game will kind of guide you along to do certain tasks, like beat a boss, get an achievement, complete like a side quest or something like that. And that's something that the game is explicitly saying, hey, you should do this, you'll get a reward, or it'll be a rewarding thing to do if you complete this thing. Rather than be through like your reward is progression or something like that. And then of course there are intrinsic sort of goals, and those are things that you set yourself in the game world that you want to achieve. And in a lot of ways, those have actually been proven to be more rewarding, but a lot of people don't want to have to set their own intrinsic rewards, right? Who here has opened up Minecraft before and they sit down and they go, I don't know what I want to do? Everyone, exactly, right? Sometimes you just want to sit down in the game and you just want to do what you're told, complete a task, get something out of it. But intrinsic rewards, when you do come up with something, can also be very rewarding. Game development is, in a lot of ways, an intrinsic goal, right? Nobody here, I don't believe at least, nobody here was told to come here, sit down, listen to me talk, go home, make a game, something like that. You're here because you want to be, and that in itself is very rewarding. That is very intrinsic sort of goal and motivation. So I just want you guys thinking about that when I talk about these other topics, because these two words are going to pop up in there. And we're going to do a little bit of an activity that I'll talk about later, and you're going to have to keep those things in mind as well. So, goals and objectives. Goals and objectives, those are like the biggest sort of reward kind of factor that you have to think about. So obviously add clear goals for the player to complete. That's huge. Make sure that they're not very convoluted. You're not like confusing the player. Mark your objectives out on a map, for example. That adds a lot to a player's experience. If they can't figure out how to get the reward, they're going to get stuck and they're going to have a bad time. Add benefits to completing any optional goals. So there's no point in doing a side quest if you never get anything out of it, right? You can give the player a cool sword or even just a small sum of money, and that might motivate them to stop what they're doing on the main storyline and go run off and do some little side task that you have set up for them. That could be really cool in and of itself, but if you don't kind of sometimes put some bait out there to kind of get the player to get involved with it, they might not ever even see that cool side quest you have set up. And again, rare items, achievements, make sure you put all that in there to kind of excite them for it. And you can be more creative than that. Those are just some quick examples. Make the goals rewarding and fun to do, obviously. Don't just like fluff your game with different tasks. A really good example of that, and a lot of this is going to overlap with like level design. I did a level design talk in the past, and this also covered a lot of stuff like this. So don't do backtracking for the sake of backtracking, right? That's a huge like, oh, we're going to give you an objective, like get this player back to the beginning of the game. Maybe do like, oh, what are those called? Where you have to bring another like non-player character with you, NPC with you. Escort, yeah. Don't do those if you don't have to, right? Unless you really have a reason in the game. A lot of the times they throw those in there, they're just like, okay, we have this character, we need them to get from point A to point B. We'll just throw this in there as fluff. It's not very rewarding. You know you're just doing it because the game's telling you to. You're not like, wow, I really love, having this character die 10 times to an enemy because their AI is really dumb, right? So if you don't really need it, and it's just there to have a reward, don't include it. That's what I'm trying to get at with that. And then, of course, not all games need clear goals or objectives. Minecraft is a great example. They threw the Ender Dragon in there just so people did have something, because for a long time there wasn't anything. You just kind of hung out in the game world. Terraria is kind of like the opposite of that, where there's like always like another boss to fight, more items to kind of collect and build your character up. But a game doesn't necessarily need that. Another great example is like Gary's mod, right? If anybody's played that before, there's no rules or objectives or storyline. You just kind of spawn in and throw a bunch of stuff down and have a good time. And that's a very sorry, I can't say the word, intrinsically motivating kind of game. Okay. Completion. Again, this is a subset of an objective, right? Your objective is to complete the game, complete this set of achievements, complete whatever, and you're going to use that to try to reward the player in some sort of way. So it's an extrinsic goal, typically. You're saying, hey, here's something that I want you to do, and you're going to complete it. It is commonly seen in a lot of games as like achievements, collectibles, anything you would have like a progress bar towards. So if you want to have that big like 100% completed stamp on your profile at the end, that would be an intrinsic completion goal. And then it can be more rewarding through an intrinsic task. Sorry, I meant to say extrinsic before, but it's meant to be more rewarding through an intrinsic task. For example, if I just started like grinding mobs for EXP, and then all of a sudden I got a big icon that popped up on the bottom of my screen that said, oh, congratulations, you got the slaughtering of mobs achievement or something like that. That gives you, the warm fuzzies inside, because you're like, oh, I was just doing this to do this other thing, and now I got even more rewards out of it, right? It's kind of like a hidden reward. A game, again, I'm going to be saying Minecraft a lot in this because it's just such a great example. Minecraft does that really well. You'll be, mining, you'll get a diamond, and then you'll get the Mine Diamonds reward or achievement. It'll pop up on your screen, and then you'll get, again, excited because you got something on top of getting diamonds, which in that game is usually pretty exciting. So that's just another thing to kind of think of in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic rewards in completion. All right, progression. Talked about this before again in the level design kind of talk. Progression is huge. There's no point in playing a game if the game is going to be the exact same 3 hours from now as it is right when you start it, right? You want something to happen. You want the world to progress. You want you to progress. If you can do both, that's even better. And it's more than just like, oh, I got to the next level. Oh, I got another level up or something like that. It can go a lot deeper than that. For example, in a level itself, you can have the level progressively get harder. You can have the level change themes. If you have some sort of open world, you can have the areas that you wouldn't reach until later in your playtime be a lot scarier looking, right? Like a lava area or something. That's very typical of a lot of video games. And then, of course, the accumulation of items and currency is huge. And that can be anything from like, oh, I played a JRPG for 20 hours, got a bunch of money from it. I'm going to go buy an armor set to, I'm playing Minecraft. I have 10,000 cobblestone blocks. All right, I'm a lot further. I've progressed a lot further than I was in the beginning when I had no cobblestone blocks, right? As long as something has changed and you've gained something, or maybe even lost something, you've progressed in some way, and that is very rewarding to see in a game, and that will get a lot of people to play your game. And that might sound very obvious, but just make sure you keep that in mind when you're designing games, and the more rewards you can put in this sort of way, and the more you can have the player progress, the more rewarding it's going to be for a player. Okay, replayability. So replayability is a huge deal in terms of rewards and stuff like that. A lot of the times for single player content sort of games, you'll play till the end, you'll get that, again, like dopamine rush of, oh, I beat the game, I finished the game, I can now tell my friends that I completed it, I can tell myself that I don't have to play this game anymore, I can move on to the next game, because there's, everyone knows there's so many games out there these days to play through. And you can kind of move on. But if you can have the player come back and play more, they're going to feel even more fulfilled, because this experience that they already got a lot of rewards out of, they are now going to be able to get even more rewards, hopefully in a slightly different way. So that being said, different endings can add a lot to replayability, obviously. If you have something that the player is working towards, that is obviously a setup for a reward. So if I want the player to maybe do like a route of the game where they're the good guy instead of the bad guy, they might see different content, and then when they get to the end, they'll be rewarded with feeling, oh, I feel good, I beat the game this way. Or if they're being the bad guy and they don't like to be the bad guy, they're still getting the reward of, oh, I got to see a different ending, I got more content out of the game, and I'm going to feel a lot more fulfilled because of it. Be careful that your rewards vary from playthrough to playthrough. This is really important for multiplayer games. So obviously, as we all know, you can play a game like Overwatch for an infinite amount of time. And it'll be, I don't want to say fresh every time, but you'll definitely not have a lot of matches that are exactly the same, right? And it's really important that you switch up objectives and your rewards in a game like that, because otherwise, if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, it's going to get very grind heavy, very repetitive, and there's nothing stopping the player from just stopping playing your game and going to something else entirely. So a really good example of that is just like a game, again, like Overwatch or Halo or any sort of game that has different game modes. Those are different objectives that you're trying to achieve, and you're going to feel different kinds of fulfillment and rewards from that, just because there are different kinds of game modes and objectives to do. So obviously, if you have like a first-person shooter, don't just do capture the flag, do capture the flag, and just Slayer, something where you're just trying to kill the other player. Just a bunch of different game modes. Capture the objective is a huge one, obviously. And just make sure you switch it up a lot, have different rewards. If you can add stuff to a multiplayer game, like skins and other customization features, that'll add a lot to the game. And that will also push out the runtime. Any way you can reward the player while still switching up the objectives is going to, again, add to players' runtime and stop you from like bleeding out your player base and having people flee your game and your server's running empty. All right, so exploration and discovery. This is, again, something that is very rewarding to a player. Basically, when people think of exploration and discovery, most people go straight to open world, right? That's what everyone thinks. They think open world game, big world, I'm going to go look behind every waterfall, I'm going to go look at every NPC, see all the cool details. That's not what I mean by this. It can mean that, don't get me wrong, but it can also be something like I'm playing a platforming game and I want to get up to that ledge up there, and I jump up there and there's like a cool reward for getting up there, right? Or, in a big 3D game, maybe not even open world, I see that there's like a big hill or a tall structure in a level, and I go up there and I get a new vantage point. And even though there's not like a material reward, there isn't like a rare sword or gun or something up there, just having something that gives the player something more than just I got up to this point, can again double that reward cycle. And an intrinsic motivation of I want to go up to that high spot can then be an extrinsic, oh, I put something up there for you that motivated you to get up there, and it kind of builds on itself. Again, that goes back to, like, for example, the Minecraft achievement thing. I was killing mobs, I got EXP, I got an achievement for it. That's even better. It's also very hard to do in open world games, and that's really specifically because you have this massive map, right? And you've got to make sure that at least the majority of it feels like it has something to offer. I don't want to be wandering around a giant field for 3 hours with nothing to do. So you got to have objectives, and hopefully you got to have rewards with those objectives scattered all over the world pretty evenly. You don't want to have, like, your item shop next to a guy who gives a side quest, and behind both of them there's a rare item, right? You want to have, like, a town with some side quests, and then maybe out in the wilderness there's a couple, like, hidden items that you can find. But if you're wandering around for those hidden items, somewhere in between there's another guy who gives a side quest, and that way when you're going from point A to point B, there's smaller objectives along the way, and you can get rewards from that instead of just having to go on some big epic quest through nothing, get to somewhere, and then hopefully get your reward at that point. All right, experimentation and options. This is my personal favorite one to kind of talk about. So more options is more discoveries, which is more fun, right? We already talked about discoveries. Now we're going to talk about options that can lead to discoveries. So the most notable one in a lot of games is crafting. I'm going to go and I'm going to have a lot of options for you to craft with. I'm going to have, stuff that you can find in the world, like stones and wood and minerals and what else, all sorts of stuff like that. Then I'm going to have stuff that, like, enemies drop specifically, and then there's going to be specific, even rarer items that you can only get as, like, rare percent drops from bosses. And as people are collecting all of these kind of items and goods, they can find out that there's a plethora of cool items that they can then craft with those. And sometimes that can be really rewarding, finding out all this cool stuff. I know in this day and age it's a little harder because a lot of people just go online and they Google, how do I make the bed in Minecraft, right? And that kind of ruins it a little bit. But if you ever played something like Terraria, for example, for the first time, where they just have so many crazy weapons and items, and maybe you didn't even know that, like, the rocket launcher that shoots, shooting stars out of it existed, and then all of a sudden you collect a bunch of shooting stars and, like, meteorite ore, and all of a sudden you can make a rocket launcher that shoots shooting stars, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. I feel really rewarded. Now I can make that and play with it in the world. So that's really important to think about. Don't just have people collecting things for the sake of collecting things. Again, there's no reward in that. It's an objective, sure, but there's no reward, there's no outcome in that. The more kind of possibilities you can get from something, the more rewarding it will be. Next, move sets. This is, again, huge topic. If anybody's watched a speedrun before, that's somebody who's mastered the game. They've gone through, they've played around with the move set, they've gotten, something more out of it. When I'm playing a game, I'm not a speedrunner, right? But I'll see how a level is constructed, and I'll see that there's the obvious answer that Shigeru Miyamoto put in Mario to get from platform A. I'm sorry, I use Mario a lot as an example, but get from platform A to platform B, or I could jump over platform B using some crazy move that I came up with, right, of, like, jumping and then jumping off of Mario's hat and then doing a spin and then landing on platform C, which is further away. Then it's very rewarding for me to have pulled that off, right? It's not necessary, it's intrinsic. The game designer didn't say, you have to do this crazy move. It was an option, and I feel rewarded for pulling it off. So you can give a player a massive crazy moveset, and then you can kind of give them a sandbox to play around with it, and then they can kind of experiment and figure out cool ways to exploit that moveset to do cool things. And if you're a really good game designer, you'll secretly be extrinsically motivating the player to do those things themselves on their own. For example, I might put a ledge somewhere in a level that you can't actually reach unless you know how to pull off that crazy move. But if the player doesn't know any better, they might think they just got to that platform early, or they cheated. They were supposed to hit a lever somewhere and lower that platform, but in reality, the player or the designer designed it so that player would do that. So that's just something to kind of think about in that regard. Enemies are a huge one. You can have a really obvious answer to defeating an enemy, but there could be, some other ways you could do it. And the more experimentation you do with defeating these enemies, the more rewarding it can be. Really good example, say you're playing a Legend of Zelda game, there's an enemy that you can obviously just keep smacking with a sword like 20 times until it dies. Yeah, that's the proper way to do it. It's the way that they kind of expect you to do it. But you could find out that you could place a bomb down, then run 20 feet away and then shoot it with an arrow, and that might kill the enemy immediately. And figuring that out is not only rewarding because it was like, oh cool, I killed the enemy in one hit. I feel like a genius doing this whole setup. But it also allows the player to have a future strategy, which is rewarding in and of itself to deal with these enemies in an easier way. So having different ways to kind of deal with not only enemies, but let's just say problems that the player might run into in the game world can be very rewarding to find. Dialogue trees. Okay, so dialogue trees, this is kind of difficult to kind of implement into a game. It sounds really easy. I just put text in a box and you have a bunch of text options. But the more dialogue trees you have, the more potential story outcomes you have, and the more potential story outcomes you have, the more content you have to make, and it kind of snowballs down the road and you have to make a bunch of stuff. So the best advice I have with a dialogue tree is you can give people a lot of options that feel like they lead to a lot of different outcomes, but they don't actually, right? So a dialogue tree would typically be something where it spreads out and then it converges back in, right? Another really great example of this is like the Telltale games, specifically The Walking Dead. Those are the ones at least I'm the most familiar with. So they'll have the Telltale Walking Dead series of games where they'll say, oh, you got bit by a zombie. It's kind of a bad example. Let's say, I don't know, somebody's going to go shoot someone, right? Somebody's going to go shoot someone, and you're like, okay, either I can stop them from shooting this person, or I can save this person, right? Or sorry, that would be stopping. I can either shoot this person or I cannot shoot this person. Let's keep it simple. I can shoot this person or not. And if I shoot this person, something bad's going to happen down the line. I could have needed this person. Or I could have not shot this person, but then I got to feed him and take care of him, and it might lead to a different story outcome. When in reality, no matter what happens, the guy still gets hit by a truck 20 episodes later, and it doesn't really matter, right? So, they also do something really cool in that game where it's like you have a dialogue option, you click it, and then it says, so-and-so will remember that, right? Clementine will remember that you said she was a jerk or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I feel really bad. This is going to lead to a bad outcome in the game. And it turns out most of the time in those games, when that little box appears and scares you, it doesn't actually do anything. They just put it in there to make it feel like you're changing the world. It makes you feel like you're going to change the objective or get a different, outcome, but you don't. So that's not really related to rewards, but I just wanted to go on a tangent because I thought that was cool. But anyway, moving back to this, secrets. Secrets are obviously something that's very rewarding. And again, we're going to go back into some other stuff. So exploration, having a secret, finding the secret is a reward in and of itself. Putting a reward as the secret, right? So I find a chest with an item in it. That's very rewarding. What I'm trying to get at with all this sort of stuff about exploration and finding things, don't have a game like Skyrim where players want to climb up all these structures you have in the world, and then when you get to the top, there's nothing up there, right? They're going to struggle and try to glitch the game out, try to walk up a wall or something like that. And when they finally manage to pull it off, it turns out the game designer never intended them to get up there, and there's nothing up there, and that's a huge bummer, right? The lack of the reward is working against you then. And in a lot of games, it's kind of hard to design around because it's like, I don't know what the player's going to do. I didn't know he was going to backwards long jump up the stairs, break the door, and find the secret room. Okay, that wasn't intentional. But if there is a possibility that a player can get to something, even if it isn't fully intentional, make sure that you have some sort of reward for the player to get there. If it was difficult to do, if it was difficult to pull off, make it worth the player's time. And we're going to talk about that in risk versus reward in just a second here. But make sure you make everything that the player does worth their time in some way. Okay, risk versus reward. So this is a pretty, I kind of dumbed this down. Again, there's a lot you could talk about here, but the bare bones of it is if you're going to have something risky, if you're going to make the player do something difficult, have a reward that matches that difficulty, that matches that risk. If they're going to risk all their money for fighting this really difficult boss, and if they die, they lose all that money, then make sure that they're getting a huge cash payout if they do win, right? Otherwise, there's no point in doing that. Why would I risk all my money to get like $5 back in return? Why would I risk $10,000 to get $5 back, right? You can kind of think of that kind of like gambling, right? Obviously, if you go to the casino, no one's gambling at the casino because they can win $5. They're gambling at the casino because they think they're going to make, tens of thousands of dollars. So, there's obviously a problem if you don't do that. High risk and low reward, not worth the trouble. Low risk and high reward, it's too easy, right? It was too easy to get that super magical sword that now murders everything in the game. There should be risk for your reward, and it shouldn't match in level and in difficulty. A great example of that, I'm trying to think of like a solid game for that, but maybe like Majora's Mask, for example. It's kind of a crazy example, but if you want to get, yeah.
I have an example. In Persona 5 Royal, there's a social link that will instant kill enemies if you're high enough level. So at the end of the game, you're basically just running through enemies no matter what. So it just kind of takes away from combat.
Exactly. Was there something that you have to do to get that?
It's mainly just managing. It's a time management thing. Who do you go for in some cases?
Yeah, but it's like it's one of the characters who you would hang out with first of all people.
Okay.
So, you're gonna get that insta kill ability very easily, and most people will get it. So it's not like a lot of risk associated with it.
Really high awareness because
True, but
it's more like memento scrambling.
It can trivialize some parts of the game. Most people probably won't have an issue with it, but if you grind for longer than the designers expect you to, then the rest of the game is you just steamroll.
That is a great example. I only played a little bit of Persona 3, so I apologize. I should play 5. I need to just get around and play through all of them. But that's a great example of just trivializing stuff, making things too easy. I know at least when I played 3, the managing of social links was a big pain. It was, really hard to kind of make sure I'm meeting with enough players enough times to rank up their social links. But if you're saying it's the first person you meet and they're always available on every day to meet with, yeah, that does take kind of some of the risk out of that. So, great example, actually. Okay, so now, hopefully everyone brought something they could edit Google Slides on. If you didn't, no big deal. But we're gonna do something where you guys are now gonna make some of the presentation for me so that I don't have to. All right, I got a little lazy there, all right, I admit it, but it'll be fun, don't worry. So, here's my example. I'm going to give you guys something like a topic, a genre, and you guys are going to pick a game that you want to talk about. There can be repeats if you guys want to pick the same game. Try not to have the same stuff on your slides. If you do it, if it happens, it's okay. So I did Sandbox, and I've been talking a lot about Minecraft, so I did Minecraft. And I've got Extrinsic, like I mentioned earlier, defeating the Ender Dragon, and the reward was I beat the main game. That's a very lame one. It's a very basic one, but it does get the point across. And then the intrinsic one, got a little bit more creative with it. I mined a bunch of diamonds to make 5 jukeboxes for my 5 Minecraft beach houses, right? And then I get to listen to music at all of these 5 beach houses now. That's my reward. It wasn't obviously decided by, what's the guy who made Minecraft? I'm blanking on the guy's name. Notch. Notch was like, no, Hayden's going to go make beach houses. That's an intentional. No, that's something I came up with. I wanted to have that, and now I get a reward from it. Okay, and that's their first slide, right? So pick a game, fill out these 4 things. I have templates on there. I'm going to share the link in a second. Then the second part is the same thing again, but just for generic sandbox game, right? So try to do something different than the game you just did, but it can be for a game that you're working on. It can be for a different game, like, you know, for sandbox maybe Terraria or something like that. You can make something up that would fit. I said get an achievement for spawning 300 mobs in creative mode, and then the reward is I get percentage towards my 100% completion, and I also got a rare achievement. And then the intrinsic thing that I did was I went farming and I got remaining materials I needed to make a lasagna, and then I got a really cool lasagna that restores health and stuff like that. All right, so you don't have to take this seriously. You can put memes on your slide, I don't care. Just make sure it's, you know, not gonna get us in trouble when we post a video of the slides on YouTube. Yeah, so go nuts. So I'm gonna share the slide deck with everyone on Discord and the general meeting chat. And then I'm going to basically ask all of you to put your hands up who want to participate. And then I'll give you guys each a genre to pick 2 slides from. And my slides obviously will be in there too for an example, so you can copy those as well. Are we all set? Okay, cool. Let's see what you guys made. I'm excited. All right, here we go. All right, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Beat King DDD as an extrinsic one, and then the reward is progress to the next level. Very good. Intrinsic, get the golden fish in the fishing mini game. Lots of money and achievement, and an ice cream shot. Good. Very good. That wasn't something that the designers necessarily made specific for the main storyline, but it was something that the player could go after. And you do get an achievement for that, which technically the achievement is extrinsic, but if players weren't knowing that there was an achievement there, that it can still be considered an intrinsic goal. So, good job. The Forest. Okay. Extrinsic. Progress the story and find out what happened to a kid. Reward, you get the satisfaction of solving cool mysteries and unlock cool new items. Great example. Intrinsic, build a dope looking house. Reward, you get to build something cool and you will not get wrecked by terrifying zombies. All right, very good. Did you guys know there's a Forest 2 coming out soon, apparently? It's already out? I didn't even know that. All right. Is it any good?
No, early access.
Oh, okay. Is it any good, though? Has anybody played it yet? Mixed things? Okay. Well, they got time to fix it. 2D Fighter? Okay, let's see. Win 10 online matches in a row. An achievement and a fancy schmancy title that says you're good at the game and won 10 games in a row. Very good. Learn the combos that do the mega damage. Awesome. You get good at the game. You can win more often, which is fun. Suck it, Graham. Great, good job. I was wondering how you're going to pull that one off, but no, that's a perfect example for 2D fighters. All right, Mortal Kombat. Beat the main story. Come on, guys, you knew better than beat the game. We're getting a lot of beat the games here. Get a satisfying reward of how the story ends. Learn how to do final moves. Hey, lots of blood. Oh, wait, babality. Oh my god. Okay. Good. Very good. Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot more examples for 2D fighters as well, but these are great examples of things you can put into your own 2D fighting games to do that. All right, Doom. Player glory kills an enemy. They will receive health and ammo drops. That's a great one. Intrinsic, the player explores the level completely. They get to hear cool music the whole time. Yeah, that's a good one. The Doom music is really good. I don't know if you guys have listened to the soundtrack, but it's a phenomenal soundtrack. There was like some sort of thing going on with the sound designer was fighting with the team because someone like re-released his music digitally and it wasn't as good, I think. I don't know, but yeah, no, these are good examples. First person shooter single player. Player kills enemy in a level. Reward C.
That was a lazy one. It was just like clear the level.
Okay. Works. Definitely works. As long as you guys are getting the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic, that's the main goal of this. So far, every single one of you has. Player explores the level completely. They get to hear cool music the whole time.
That's not updated. But
Okay.
Player beats the enemies as fast as possible. They become better at the game.
That is a really good one. I like the getting better at the game because it's not something that a lot of people think about, right? They think that like I'm going to get something in the game world, but you as a person physically getting better at a game is a huge intrinsic reward, and that'll carry with you even through multiple playthroughs of a game. So that's a really, really good one. Okay, Team Fortress 2 FPS multiplayer completes the game's achievements. Achievements for your Steam account, in-game items to wear and use. Better not have gotten that from the slide where I had Team Fortress 2 achievements on it. No? Okay. Test out different weapon combinations, try in different cosmetic items, gain skill and a neat alternative playstyle to the class. Possess the drip. I like that. I like that a lot. Human Fall Flat. I play through the level with friends and solve the puzzles. Progression, unlocking the next level, and an achievement. I push my friend off the side of a cliff and cause them to lose progress. We laugh from the interaction. Great, that's a good one. It's another multiplayer sort of way to add intrinsic value. All right, puzzle platformer. I play through the level normally by using the mechanics introduced. I get an achievement and points towards completion. I try to use the new mechanics to access a part of the level that is almost off the screen and boundary break. I get a cool secret. Nice. So just as a quick recap of what we went over, again, to make your game rewarding, again, you don't have to have all of these things, but make sure you have something in your game to make it worth the player's time. Goals and achievements, you can have completion objectives, progression. Progression, that one is completely mandatory. You got to have progression in there somehow. Replayability, exploration and discovery, experimentation and options, and of course, risk versus reward. For nice. Snuck that in there, Ethan. Reminders. All right. Any questions about the game jam? Have you had time to think about it? No? So if you do think of anything, you still have time to ask. Or, of course, you can always ask any of the executive team members on Discord or any of the chairs, even for that matter. So that's going to be, again, 7 p.m. March 24th to 7 p.m. March 26th, and then about like an hour or award show after. I give an hour and a half just in case. It's going to be in the same spot as always. It's going to be in Elling's 308, that basement room where we always have it. And yeah, have a great spring break, everybody. As always, go forth, make games, be awesome. Thanks for coming.